And we are going to be live right now, hopefully right now. And we're coming to you from the Open Ed Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. And I am your host for Virtually Connecting. Virtually Connecting is from the Open Ed Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. See, that's the feedback thing. So we have the things that pop up when the stream goes live, and I end up hearing myself talking and like, who is that guy talking in the background? And it's me. Anyhow, Virtual Connecting is it's a thing we do to sort of bring the conference experience to people who aren't at a conference, and chance for people at a conference like Open Ed to sort of share their experience. Same sort of way that you do when you're at a conference and you just talk in a hallway, which I always think is some of the better parts. So we're really excited to have a big group of people on both ends. And so I'm gonna call on people for our virtuals just to introduce yourself and where you're from and say anything you want about openness. So on my left first, I'm gonna go to Paul Bond in upstate New York. Say hello, Paul.
Hello, Paul. I'm Paul Bond. I'm a librarian at the Community College in Binghamton, New York. And I also teach an open online class, DS 106, through University of Mary Washington.
Excellent. And now we'll go to Irene.
Good evening, everyone. Or is it good morning where you are?
It's good something.
Oh, it's good day. All right. My name is Irene Mario. I am a member of Emerge Africa and an online facilitator for one of the courses that is offered at the University of Cape Town, the facilitating online course. So nice to be here.
Excellent. Have you done Virtually Connecting before?
When we had a festival of e-learning with Emerge Africa, we had just one session. I've not yet joined any other. So I'm the baby here, so be gentle.
That's okay. We're like a cult. We draw people in, but we're a fun cult. Okay. Now we'll go over to Autumn Keynes, who's in the Michigan area, Detroit-ish, right?
Not a cult. But I would say it's easy to make that analogy. My name is Autumn Keynes. I am an instructional designer at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. I live just outside of Detroit, Michigan. I was born in Detroit and I claim Detroit as my hometown. I'm also a co-director of Virtually Connecting. So it's just really wonderful to be here with all of you from around the world and to be connecting with our on-site folks there at Open Ed. Thanks.
Excellent. And now to my co-host and partner and mad tweeter, blog post editor, Helen DeWaard. Hey, Helen.
Let me make sure I've got my audio on. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen DeWaard. I am virtually connecting from the southernmost tip, not quite, southernmost tip of Canada in Windsor, Ontario, across the river from Autumn's Detroit location.
That's right. And I know from being there that like it's almost the same latitude as San Francisco, which kind of blows people's minds.
Yes.
And now also on the late night shift from over in Cairo, I believe, is Mohammed Ahmed. Good morning.
Morning. I am Mohammed Ahmed, Senior Instruction Designer, Mansour University and Team Leader, and PhD Education Technology, and working for Emerge African Arabic countries, development e-learning courses, and working for UNESCO and sometimes as a freelancer. That's it.
Great. Thanks for staying up and joining us. And for everybody, this is like jump in at any time and ask something, provoke some controversy, do some mad cheering. And we're going to switch now to make sure I haven't missed anybody, to the main event, the room in the basement of some hotel in Phoenix. Hello, Phoenix.
Hello. Hello.
Do I have to call on you guys?
I'll get started. Yeah. So, hi everybody. Great to see you all. My name is Beck Pitt. I'm a researcher at the Open University and I'm part of the OER Hub team. So great to see you all and be here in Phoenix as well.
Hi everyone. I'm Rob Farrow. I work with Beck at the Open Education Research Hub at the Open University.
Oh, I think we lost your audio, folks. Calling Clint. We're not going to panic because it's just what happens. And
I don't know, I might panic.
We don't panic, do we? This is like teaching. Stuff goes wrong, you know, when you.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Hi, can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as good. Sorry, I switched off the microphone here. We're losing some audio occasionally, so I'm not sure exactly why, but we'll try this for now.
I blame the technology.
Yeah, I blame the technology. Not the technologist.
Never the technologist.
Rob? Do we need to go again, or did you hear it?
Nope, we heard you guys. Beck and Rob from the Hub.
I'm Heather Ross. I'm from the University of Saskatchewan. I work in the Teaching and Learning Center. I'm an educational development specialist, and I lead our open initiative for the university.
Great.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tutaleni Asino, and I'm at Oklahoma State University. I'm an assistant professor in our educational technology program and also direct our emerging technologies and creativity research lab.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. And there's a bunch of geeks in the back, but that's Clinton and Ken. They're helping us out. They're on-site buddies. So how's the first day? Like, anybody want to jump in with, we can get to sort of like the big announcement at some point, but I want to hear more about the conference experience.
Yeah.
I would say the conference for me so far has a slightly transitional feel. And I say that partly because I've been lucky enough to be attending for several years in a row. And a lot of those people who were there in the early days, who came regularly, don't seem to come anymore. And in their place, we have lots of new people every year. I think they said something like 450 new people this year compared to last year. So it's quite interesting in the sense that as it continues to sort of prosper and grow, there's this kind of constant renewal now each year. As new people get exposed to the kind of open textbook adoption sort of message, and that's becoming quite successful in the way it's being rolled out. But then maybe as people reach a certain point where they go, okay, well, we've kind of done that, or we know about that, we want to do something else or something more kind of experimental or, you know, just a bit different with OER. I'm getting less sense of that at the conference now. So it seems to be like the sort of the nature of it has been changing over time, partly, I suppose, because of the strategic direction chosen, but also because of the success of that basic formula of go into your college, talk to your librarian, use these open resources, and that being quite a sort of successful message. So, so yeah, I would say, you know, it feels like moving beyond almost like the sort of, you know, the initial phase of some of this stuff. As it becomes more mainstream, becomes more of a kind of institutional option, it's becoming more narrow in that rather than a very sort of broad perspective. So I've been kind of thinking about it like that a little bit.
And I think that makes it difficult for those of us who our institutions don't fit the model, because somebody went and talked to our librarians, they would tell them to go to me at the Teaching and Learning Center because our library isn't heavily involved in this. And we were saying at lunch today that Canada's different than the US in that we don't have a federal Department of Education. Everything is provincial. And then each province is very different because Saskatchewan and Alberta no longer have overarching bodies like BC Campus and eCampus Ontario or Campus Manitoba. And so that it is different for us as Canadians as well, just the different model there. And so, but I felt that for a while now in that it just wasn't always addressing us, but it's these things, it's the in-between session stuff, meeting with people and talking to people that I still get the most out of.
Good to hear. Any
And I think
standout
that
sessions over
something
there?
coming from Angela's keynote as well really resonated with me, this idea of staying curious and like keep asking questions. And I think that's a really important part of like everyone, no matter how long, kind of been a part of like the open education kind of space, you know, is to keep on kind of asking questions and rethinking and thinking again about stuff to keep engaged. And yeah.
But there's almost like a sort of limit to that if everything's focused on textbook adoption, and there's a kind of linear route through that. Is there room here for that kind of questioning? I suppose is what I'm wondering.
I don't know. I thought when I scanned this,
the critical takes, or tends to be more kind of, these are the successes we've been having, everyone. This is the thing that you can do in your context. But I feel a bit like really radical stuff is not necessarily happening here. We're not hearing about it here. But this is not a criticism of it. As I tried to say, like, the more you set out that plan for people to follow, it's really effective, right? Loads of people have been doing it. But I think it limits our ambition a little bit if we think of it purely in terms of adopting text, you know, just that switch.
I guess for me, that's where I'm sort of seeing the shift happening. So I think that conversation is transitioning more to those type of questioning. My entrance into openness was not from textbook. I think that from a US standpoint, I think there has been an overly emphasis on cost of textbook, which is an important thing. But for me, my interest in openness has been much more about inclusion, about representation in textbooks. So for me, as an Namibian, even if all the textbooks were free, I will not see myself in a lot of the textbooks. So, but for me, the cost of textbook was never the biggest factor. It's an important factor, but there's other issues about, you know, teaching a kid in my village with a book that is filled with snow and there's no snow for them to relate to. So for me, that's a very big part of the open movement. And I'm seeing a little bit more of that today, that there's a sort of a willingness to move beyond the conversation about the cost of textbook to culture, to inclusion, which was also represented in the keynotes today.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do at our institution, is we're starting to look at that in terms of how we use open with our indigenization initiative. But when we report to government and say they want to know how we spent the money, they don't care about pedagogy. All they care about is how much did you save students. And so I understand needing to still be talking about that, as so many of us are working on tighter and tighter budgets and wanting funding to come from government agencies. And that's what they care about is how much are students saving? How much can we campaign on that students are saving through the funding that we're going to give you? Because they're not going to give it to us when we say we're going to improve pedagogy.
If you want to see some snow, I can show you.
Alan's talking and we can't hear you.
It's what?
Check. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You guys keep on talking. Can you hear us at all?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Tutaleni, if you want to see some snow, I'm looking at it right now, but that's not.
Yeah.
I stayed in Pennsylvania long enough. I'm good. I got enough snow for a lifetime.
It's a beautiful blue sky, but what about some? Because I there's a little bit of this thing that there was a lot of textbook emphasis, but I know when I was scanning the schedule, there was a lot of non-textbook stuff going on at the conference. So that's there too, right?
And I think that's sort of what I was trying to get to. That there's a lot of that, I think, more in this conference than in the past. There's a willingness to move a little bit more to explore other topics that are related to whether it's open pedagogy, whether it's open data, open source, and all these other things. I think we were too much structured under the open educational resources, which for me tends to focus more on things and not enough on people. And I just sense that maybe it's my naivete or something, but I think that there's a little bit more of a movement into inclusive of a conversation that's broader.
I'll applaud that. Everybody, you guys are all quiet in the background.
I was going to jump in with a number of tweets that I was following around the Women of Color presentation, and the hashtag that they had attached to that presentation, and just some of the rich conversations that people were having around that particular topic. Did any of you attend that session, and what kind of vibes did you get from it?
I did. Yeah, I find it incredibly, I did participate in that session. Yeah, it was incredibly moving. There was some great presentations from the people, and then also an activity as well for people to spend time talking at the end. So yeah, it was really a powerful kind of session with people. Yeah.
That room looked ginormous this morning.
Was.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you're talking about open, because I've just come back from the e-learning Africa conference, which was in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire. And it was also talking about open, a lot of open everywhere. And every time you went to a presentation, you were asked, people were talking about, we need to open this, and you ask them, what you're presenting now, is that open? And they said no. So that is a conversation that needs to go beyond the money. I think it needs to go beyond the people who are creating the content, and see how the open will look like ultimately. So it's an interesting conversation that is going on now. Yes.
I think this is kind of the wider theme in a way, is how you go sort of beyond just the content to the practices around it. I was in a session just now, and Cable Green was talking about social and sort of political dimensions of choosing an open license, and saying, it's not just being about pedagogy, it's not just being about what you're trying to do in the classroom, but it's the relation to the commons, it's the relation to the values that you express, and the kind of virtues were mentioned, what kind of virtues you're attempting to live up to. And I think that's really important to reflect on, because if we're interested in openness as a route to enhanced possibilities and enhanced freedom, it makes no sense to me to just do the same things you're doing before, right? So you've got all these new permissions. If the only difference it makes is, well, we can just give you a photocopy for free or whatever, that seems to me to be the wrong take on this. And I think you make a really interesting point about the sort of, if I can call it sort of decolonization of resources or something like that, or realignment to a different kind of lodestar or something, where you say, okay, we have the potential to actually change some of the stuff that really we couldn't really do that in the past, right? Because you never had control over it until the printing press, the computer. These things are only recent inventions, really. So to get to the point where you now have a license innovation that lets you do that kind of distribution as well, that's only 20 years old. So we're still really just scratching the surface in some ways of what's possible. But I do think that this idea of much wider, much broader takes on what openness can be is partly what's driving some of the sort of tensions, I suppose, within this stuff in North America specifically. This is my perception of it. So, if people followed some of the controversies on Twitter before the conference panel, and why is it controversial, and it's this sort of thing, and also just looking at the kind of whether or not you're looking primarily back into the USA or all of the impact for this stuff and where it's all coming from, whether you're looking outside in the wider world. If you go to a conference like OER 19 or Open Education Global, there's much more sort of diversity in terms of just what's happening. Not in terms of just like the profile of the people, but just in terms of what's happening, and especially in the Global South, some of the quite innovative and quite impactful projects that are kind of happening. And that's partly because there's less uniformity, right? So one of the reasons why in the USA especially, some of this open textbook adoption has had real traction and real strength is because there's quite a lot of homogeneity, within a state, for instance, about how a curriculum is devised and how it's taught and what the standards are. So it's really efficient from the point of view of replacing stuff, but when you look out, when you're forced into looking at in contexts where there are much more kind of weird and wonderful things happening, it means that openness is interpreted more contextually. And it's more, what can we do rather than how do we copy what they've done and save this much money like they've done. So I really welcome this drive to explore more ambitiously and more radically what's possible through all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So where are the radicals? I know I used to use David Weiler. I had a comment that I think he used to say like openness enables the unexpected, which I always like because it talked about like there's a lot of things we can talk about, resources and licenses, but the things that happen when we create opportunities to connect and to do things collaboratively and to do things we didn't plan, and that's the part that I'm like looking for the pulse on here.
Yeah, I was thinking about something today. I've had a few conversations with people, and I think one of the troubles that we're having in Canada maybe with this is with collaboration, is we're being put into a competitive situation for students, for funding. And so it makes it, how do we convince instructors that they should be collaborating across institutions when they're worried about another institution then getting the students that we might normally get? And collaboration is great and it's at the heart of open, but it's a hard sell right now when we're worried about, when I've got a department head worried that if they open up the resources, another university is going to use it and students might go there.
Heather, I'm dealing with that right now within the same campus even. I've got folks who don't want to share their resources because somebody from another department, especially in like those intersectional kind of department type of things where we're blending some disciplines together.
I've seen it in the department because they're concerned about people replacing them.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because again, it's capital's ugly head, right? Bumping into all of this and making people afraid and like, wait, no, that's my thing. Like I did that and somebody else might take it and use it. And then they would think it was their thing, right? So I don't know. That's, and at the same time, I'm also sympathetic to the case that like, somebody put a lot of time and effort and love into building something. And then somebody else would just take it, right? And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love all the different licenses, because for me, it comes back to the agency of the creator and honoring the agency of the creator and what that creator decides that they want to do with it, right? With the way that they want to share it. So I don't know, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
This is kind of an issue with being open though, right? The more open you are, the less you express that sort of authorial intent, the more possibility there is for someone to come along and say, thanks very much, I'm going to put a price tag on that, right?
Right. Be like, no, that's Bob's. What are you talking about? I just saw him do that, right? Yeah.
There's nothing to stop you getting the works of Shakespeare, right, and putting them in a new binding and saying, right, I've got the copyright on that binding. Yeah. That's public domain for you. So in a way, I think there's a kind of I've referred to it as a sort of paradox on Twitter, but it's maybe not exactly that. But there's definitely a tension between the desire to achieve good things by being as open as possible And then because you don't want someone to do bad things, good and bad, broadly construed, you then make the license more restrictive and less open because you don't want someone else to make money off it. So I think there is a question around how we sort of enact openness in a way that makes us feel comfortable, because to me, it's about the freedoms that we give people. Then we have to be consistent in liking freedom and not being too bothered if someone else does what we consider to be a misuse of that freedom.
You guys need somber. Is it the end of a long day?
No, I find I spend a lot of my time trying to convince people that nobody really does want to steal your stuff. With the caveat that I did see the hashtag with the women on color talking about their work being appropriated. So I do want to acknowledge that because I haven't had that happen to me. But like literally, like when I go back and look at how many people actually click on things or remix my stuff, I don't think anybody really wants to steal it. Maybe it's just not good enough, or I don't know. But and it's also like I feel like for me, I'm a state employee. I feel like I'm a public employee. Like my stuff should belong, my knowledge should belong to the public in that sense. So that's cool. And I do like things like what Alan does. He puts a little tip jar. He's like, he gives it out, but here's my little tip jar. So that's a neat way to do it too.
Thanks. That interesting point about the tax dollar thing, because what happens if somebody where you are creates something and I benefit from it, but I didn't, that's not the same tax system.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
This is
and I'm also not in patentable science. Like I'm not in like I'm not starting pharmaceuticals where people like, yes, they do want to steal your stuff. I'm making like lesson plans for teachers.
No, but I have a take on this, right? Yeah. So the idea is that, Cable Green uses this argument, right? He'll say, look, if something's publicly funded, it should be openly licensed because the public has paid for that resource. However, if the public of the USA has paid for that resource, it's not clear how I, as a British person, have that claim, right? Because I'm not a member of that public. It only works if you say, accept something. This is me now, not Cable. I think it only works if you say, accept something like a global community perspective. So the commons is not owned by a particular group, a particular country. It has to be international. But then you get into the problem of, well, it's still not clear then how, Canada makes this OER and I in Britain benefit from it or something like that. So there's definitely an issue with that. The positive spin for me is to say, what it shows is that we have to think globally. We have to think, if we're talking about the commons, we have to think of it as not even necessarily maybe globally, it's a universal or a cosmic kind of, scope. But obviously that would have no legal enforceability or anything like that. So you get into a really sort of tangled kind of point between the law and the sort of ethics or the values around it for me. But yeah, I agree. It's definitely a problem. Logically, it's a problem.
Well, and I get that. It's just it goes back to me trying to make the case to government for funding. They want to see how much money the students have saved, but how do I make the case when they're going to say, yeah, but some people outside of our jurisdiction are going to benefit from that. They didn't pay into this. and I do think that that's going to be actually under certain ideas of governments in the world right now. They will be thinking that way. Yeah.
Are we, is this the wake for openness? You guys are at the last Open Ed conference. What about that?
For me, it's a bit disappointing because I think the community, especially just sort of the Open Ed conference, is reaching a certain maturity level where we can start having really some of these challenging conversations. I also come at this from Indigenous knowledge perspective, where sometimes I would argue that Indigenous knowledge is original, open, where knowledge is not owned by a certain person. And most of conversation around openness is still structured in this sort of commercialized aspect of knowledge, who owns it, who's gonna pay for it, and all these things. I have a tough time kind of identifying with that because that's not my background. That's not the idea that someone, if I write it down, someone else is going to be paying for it and someone's going to be making from it and everything else. But so I think we're at a juncture where we can start talking about a lot of these things about what is really the nature of knowledge in this ecosystem of openness and how does that look like? Where do we go? So, so when we are transitioning in this space of possibly not doing it next year, that's kind of throws what's the American saying, a wrench in the whole system of now how we're going to talk about these things.
Yeah. And I understand what you're saying about the sessions and stuff, but I think that the biggest loss will be the in-between conversations.
I'm not sure we should say it will be the last one. I can see how it could easily carry on, but it will be different, right? It will be an evolution. If it was a Pokemon, it would be finding a new form. So that's what's happening, I think. And there's a slight realignment of the sort of power constellation around it, maybe. It seems to me that, and bearing in mind, like I wasn't around for the very early years of this conference, but it seems to me, although I didn't really see much or anything really that on Twitter I would call abuse, people said there was abuse in private correspondence, but people had beef, right? Even if it wasn't abusive, there was kind of conflict and tension. And some of it was a bit unnecessary from my point of view. There were better ways to have that conversation. And I haven't seen that in previous years. In previous years, there've been disagreements. There's always disagreements, but they tended to be healthily framed. And we saw some unhealthy framing of stuff on Twitter in the lead up to this, in my opinion. And I suppose it's tempting to think this is just reflective of wider tensions within the movement and that kind of thing, which I've kind of alluded to already. But for me, the main thing is it's sort of surprising because my associations with this community are on the whole very positive about people's characters and the way they interact and the kind of respect they show each other and that sort of thing. So I don't really have a sort of final point around it, but it's an observation that I think reflects that wider tension between people with different aspirations and different ideas about what this is supposed to be, where we're supposed to be going.
So do we have any sense? I saw David's announcement on Twitter. Somebody had taken some video of it. And yeah, he didn't say this is going to be the last one. He said it would be the last one like for an indefinite amount of time. So we don't know what's going to happen next, but it also sort of sounded like a call for something new, for a new way forward, but there wasn't much detail about like how to be involved with that or how somebody would have their voice heard in a direction forward. Has there been anything since the announcement that has given some of that?
No, there really hasn't. But I guess also it really did just happen a few hours ago. So yeah. I think people are still trying to make sense of it. I think something new is going to come up in its place. It's just not going to be coordinated by David. But I don't know what that thing is going to look like. I hope it's going to be an open conversation. But it'll be interesting to see sort of at the end of the conference, maybe on Friday, to see what comes up as a result.
But maybe we just need to rethink the whole like conference, like circuit, like racket altogether. Like the whole idea of we got to fly thousands of people with like cities melting under like ocean. Guys, quiet. I'm making 1 point. Oh, it's gonna be like 2 points. And then, like we can regionalize this. They don't have to cost money. Like you look at Ed Camp, you look at these unconference like movements, like huge bar camp. There's gigantic, like we can regionalize these. And even if there was like a central leadership you flew around, it's way cheaper to fly 5 people like 5 times than to fly 500 people once. So that's just like, maybe we like, my partner works. I couldn't get out there. I'm watching the kids. I have a mess full of dishes to do. Like the whole academic conference of going to these fancy pants places, that was rooted in like rich white men at like academic universities. And it's time to rethink that, I think.
especially with climate change.
I absolutely agree. We just need to figure out we need to figure out those hallway conversations, because when it's going to be something like doing something like this, if you're, I've seen virtual conferences and that's missing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And the problem is that somebody's going to say Twitter, and I'm sorry, but the past couple of weeks has shown that it does not have the nuance. Clearly, we can't get the nuance there. People can't really engage in good conversations. It's just quick quips, and sometimes they hurt, and that's not constructive for this community.
Twitter's great for some things, but when it starts to get heavy or when it starts to get real, then Twitter is extremely confining, and the brevity is great in some respects. Brevity is wonderful for wit. Brevity is wonderful for those kind of things. But yeah, when we start getting into heavy emotional kind of things, the brevity, it does not help us at all.
It's not a great place for ethics or care.
Can it tell you what I had for lunch today?
But it can tell you what you had for lunch. I hear you had great sandwiches. No, tacos. You had tacos for lunch today.
And from our open perspective, you're also forcing people to give up their data. Like you're saying, hey, if you want to participate in this back channel, you have to agree to let this corporation have all of your data. And yes, they are selling that to third party, and they are serving ads against that data. So I also don't think that there's ways around that. And there's tools out there. There's a lot of stuff's forming. So I think we can see networks. Like when I set up an OER network, I give them a matrix chat, and that you can bridge that. Like there's lots of little tools. It takes technical knowledge though, which equals privilege.
Right. I really worry about that piece. It's another piece of open that I worry about, right? Who has the privilege to be open? And if those are the voices that get heard, yeah.
Well, I want to respect the time of the people at the conference, because I think they're on a half-hour break. Some of us who aren't, well, Irene's up in the middle of the night. We can certainly jabber for a long time, but I'd be curious, as people share, however they do, to think about.
And we lost you. Oh, great.
Oh,
there we go. Come back again.
I was on a really good ramble, but
yeah, you were too.
I guess it's a lot of this question is exactly what is this community? I mean, the community is not a conference, and there's a lot of things that overlap, and it's not one single thing. But we'll be watching Twitter to hear what comes out of the conference, and we have another session on Friday with I believe Amanda Coolidge after her keynote. So that'll be after a couple more days of activity going on there. And I just want to thank everybody, both virtually and on site, who gave their time to come here. And if these are the productive parts that I find from the conference experience. And so go out and share the unexpected, hopefully.
I appreciate you taking your time to talk to us. This back room hallway conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna I'm gonna flip to the Brady Bunch view, just so everybody can see who's here. Tanis, we'd like to see you, but other than that, I'm gonna shut off the live stream for right now. And again, appreciation to everybody for being part of virtually connecting, which is a community. So there you go.